Hey everybody, in this video I wanted to just show you a couple of little things about setting up a rig that will probably be helpful to you. So in my last video I just had a rig that was basically a linear kind of chain of these bones like along the character's spine. That will work for a lot of your models. That's probably all that you really need to do. But one thing to know that it's possible to do is that you can have multiple bones branching off from one of these points here. The important thing to realize is that these armatures are, think of them like a tree with branches. So everything needs to come back to some root bone at the bottom, and they have a kind of flow from start to end, start to end, start to end. So I can keep extruding bones out from the center like that. So let's say you're creating a human character, which I'm starting to do here. It's a good idea to, I would say, start with not even the hip of your character, but another bone, which is going to be the root bone. And you'll use the root bone to represent the movement of your character through the world, usually. So I'll have this bottom bone here be my root. I can rotate it, place it on the ground like that. I like to have my root bone be on the ground between a character's feet if it's a human character. And then the next bone is a hip bone. So maybe I'll put that up here. And I can delete this bone in between. I don't need it. I'm not going to use it for anything. So I'll delete that. And it's okay, you can see that my hip bone is still kind of connected to my root bone down here by this dotted line. So that still means that if I go into pose mode and I move this root bone, it's still going to take that hip bone with it. I'll go back to edit mode here. So from the hip, I can extrude a couple of segments of the spine, the neck, the head, like that. And maybe, you might try to give it more of a spine-like shape. Something like that, I don't know. Now for our hip, we want to have some legs coming off of that hip. Now you might think, okay, I'll have them coming off the bottom of the hip. I'll extrude down like that and like that maybe. That might seem logical to you, but this is not actually going to work. Here's why. Let's go to pose mode. And let's say I move the hip. These legs should go with it, right? But it won't. The hip is completely separate from these other leg bones. I bet you, though, yeah, if I move my root bone, the leg bones go with it. So why is that? If I want these leg bones to move with my hip here, they need to be extruded from the top bone, the top kind of node, the end of the hip up here. So I'll delete one of these and I'll do this so you can see. I'll extrude down to maybe, where that leg bone would actually need to rotate around, right there off the side of the hip a little bit, maybe here. And then I'll extrude a piece of leg and another piece of leg like that. And I'll delete this one for good measure. So you can see I've got that dotted line here. So as I move my hip bone, you can see this bone that's attached to the hip's tip goes with it. It's a branch off of the end of my hip. But its own rotation, pivot point is right where it should be. So that's one important thing to know about. Oh, I'll go back into edit mode here. Delete some other bones, and now I can do this like so. At this point, our armature is getting fairly complicated. I've got a lot of different bones. So it might be helpful to do some things to help keep track of what's what. So in edit mode, I can go to this bone tab, and this will give me information about which bone I have selected. The head, the tail, the roll, which affects, you can see how that's turning around like that. But I can just name these bones basically to help keep track of what's what. So I'll call this one root, I'll call this one hip, I'll call this one leg L, I'll call this one shin L, shin R, sorry, that should be leg R, shin R. This is kind of the naming convention for things that have a right and a left side, is you'll just put the capital letter indicating which side you're on at the end of the bone name. I can call this hip. Sometimes people will call this spine 1, or they might call it stomach or chest. I prefer stomach, chest, neck, and head. I can actually display those names that I just made by clicking to my armature tab here, I think. Let me see here. Yeah, and then I can go to viewport display. And this gives me some different options for how this can be displayed, including in front again, kind of redundant. But I can show kind of the orientation of each bone with this axes thing. I can show the names of each bone next to them, which can be kind of convenient. And I can even change the way that these bones are rendered. So sometimes when it starts to get really busy, these shapes that I have here, the octahedral shape, is really good because it clearly indicates, you know, the head and tail of each bone. But sometimes it gets too busy, and I can switch to a stick display mode, which I like because I can still select the joints independently of the bones, or even the wire, which just looks a little different. So you've got a few options here. You can pick one that you like. I don't personally like the B-bone very much, or this envelope is useful for certain things, but I would leave it alone. But you can, you know, pick what you like here. We can also control these relationships between these bones. So let's say you start working on an arm somewhere else. I've added a new bone with this add button, and there's my arm. So I'll do, this can be shoulder L, arm L, forearm L. But oh no, I've got all these bones out here and they're not connected to my chest at all, which they should be, right? No sweat, you don't have to delete all this stuff and redo it. Instead, I'll click on my shoulder bone here, I'll click on the bone tab, and then I can open this relations dropdown. And now I can pick an existing bone to basically make the parent of my shoulder. So I can click on chest here, or I can just start typing chest. And you can see now that this bone has that dotted line coming from the tip of the chest out to the base of the shoulder bone here. Like that. One last thing, and I'll delete my bones on the right side there, is if your mesh is symmetrical that you're rigging, you can basically you can set up the bones for just one side, select your whole armature, and then you can choose, let's see here, armature and then symmetrize, and this is going to make copies of existing bones like this. Whoa. Oh, I see. So this tried to do it around the x-axis. I have my armature kind of set up facing the wrong way. So if you see that happen, go ahead and delete it, and then you can just rotate around the z-axis by, say, 90 degrees, whatever, and then I'll try to center this thing over the x-axis like that, so it's facing the right way. So yeah, usually you want the y-axis to be forward for your character. And now I'll try that again, symmetrize, and you can see it generated a whole new set of bones on the opposite side using anything that had that has the letter L at the end as an indication that there should be a matching R on the opposite side. So that's a handy way to build a lot of your mesh armature automatically. There's other tools in here that you can play with if you want. Extrude, duplicate, you can play with the bone roll, you can subdivide, you can invert the direction of a bone. But that will get you started, I think.